The Trans-Global Airlines hangar was a cathedral of steel and noise. It was 2 in the morning. Outside, freezing rain pounded the roof. Inside, the massive bay doors sealed the 50-man night shift inside a pressure cooker of corporate expectations. Sitting under halogen lights was the company's crown jewel, a brand new Airbus A350. This was Flight 808. In 14 hours, it would carry passengers across the Pacific Ocean and the airline's financial reputation. Transglobal was 2 weeks away from finalizing a $14 billion corporate merger. The boardroom mandate was strict. 100% on-time departures, 0 delays, 0 excuses. An aircraft on-ground status was a career-ending offense. The pressure was a tangible weight, felt in the frantic way. Mechanics tightened safety lock wire. Everyone ran. In the dead center of this chaos stood Maya Lin. Maya was exactly 23 years old. She weighed barely 110 pounds in her oversized navy blue coveralls. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, held by the strap of scratched safety goggles. Her small hands were permanently stained with deep black aviation grease. She was the youngest mechanic on the floor. She was the only woman on the entire night shift. The senior crew ignored her existence. They called her the rookie. They assumed she was merely a diversity hire. They gave her the worst, most degrading jobs, treating her like an inconvenient ghost. They did not know her story. They did not know the fire that burned quietly inside her. Maya had learned early that people lied, but machines followed the immutable laws of physics. She had paid for her airframe and power plant certificate by cleaning hangars at night, studying advanced schematics while the world slept. She possessed a preternatural gift for stress physics and metal fatigue. She could vividly visualize internal pressure distribution and understood the crystalline molecular structure of aerospace-grade titanium. She knew how metal failed. But on the massive trans-global maintenance floor, her quiet genius was completely invisible. She deliberately kept her head down. She checked safety wire with obsessive precision. She tightened bolts to the exact torque specification. She spoke only when spoken to. She had exactly one friend in the massive facility. His name was Pops Henderson. Pops Henderson ran the tool crib. A retired Air Force crew chief, he was the only person who noticed Maya reading advanced engineering schematics. He would quietly slip her restricted documents. Metal does not lie. People do, Pops told her one quiet night. People cut corners to save $1. But the metal always tells the brutal truth when it breaks. Maya never forgot those words. The exact opposite of Pops Henderson was Marcus Thorne. Marcus Thorne was the chief inspector. He wore a perfectly pressed white shirt and polished boots, walking the hangar like a feudal lord. He was personally responsible for the 100% on-time departure metric. He had a dark reputation for pencil whipping, signing off on critical maintenance records without actually inspecting the aircraft part, simply to avoid delaying lucrative departures. It was exactly 2:15 in the morning when the timeline of destruction officially began. Silence. The steady hum of the hangar ventilation system droned on in the background, a white noise covering the impending disaster. Maya was positioned directly under the massive right wing of Flight 808. She was strapped tightly into a yellow nylon safety harness, standing precariously on the platform of a raised hydraulic scissor lift. Her face was mere inches away from the cold exterior metal of the right engine. The engine was a Rolls-Royce Trent. It was a breathtaking masterpiece of modern engineering, worth exactly $30 million. It contained hundreds of individual turbine blades, operating in core temperatures that could easily melt solid steel. Maya was assigned to perform a routine fluid check. It was absolute grunt work that should have taken 10 minutes max. She unlatched the heavy access panel on the lower section of the engine cowling. The metal groaned slightly as she swung it open. She reached deep inside with her thick glove to check the magnetic chip detector. The chip detector was a crucial, non-negotiable safety device. It was a powerful magnetic plug seated deep within the engine's internal oil system. If the internal gears or high-speed turbine blades started to break down from intense stress, they would shed microscopic shavings of metal directly into the circulating oil. The magnet would instantly catch those loose shavings. A perfectly clean plug meant a perfectly healthy engine. A dirty plug was the very first terrifying warning sign of a catastrophic internal failure. Maya firmly grasped the heavy hex nut of the detector with her wrench. She applied steady pressure and twisted it counterclockwise. The plug popped free with a soft, wet hiss of displaced aviation oil. She pulled the heavy detector out into the light. She grabbed her heavy-duty inspection flashlight and shined the bright, concentrated beam directly onto the magnetic tip. She froze. Her breath caught painfully in her throat. The cold air of the hangar suddenly felt suffocating. The tip of the powerful magnet was not clean. It was completely covered in a thick, glittering paste of metallic fuzz. It was not just one or two harmless specks of normal wear. It was a heavy, undeniable accumulation. The metal shavings caught the harsh light of her beam, shimmering with a sinister gray color. The expensive oil dripping from the plug was thick and cloudy with particulate matter. Maya felt a cold spike of pure adrenaline hit the bottom of her stomach. This was a brand new engine, with barely 300 total flight hours logged on it. The internal components should have been immaculate. Finding a heavy accumulation of metal fuzz like this meant only one terrifying thing. The high-pressure rotational section, the N2 compressor spool, was actively tearing itself apart from the inside out. She leaned in closer, staring intently at the tiny shavings. Her brilliant mind immediately began calculating the friction coefficient, thermal dynamics, and structural degradation. The texture of the metal was completely wrong. Aerospace-grade titanium 6Al4V did not shed like this under extreme thermal stress. True titanium created sharp, distinct, microscopic splinters that caught the light like broken glass. This fuzz looked crumbly. It looked horribly brittle. It looked horrifyingly cheap. It looked exactly like low-grade commercial alloy used in cheap automobile parts, not a $30 million jet engine. Maya did not hesitate for a single second. The absolute laws of physics did not care about corporate mergers. She immediately climbed down the hydraulic lift, her heavy boots hitting the metal stairs rapidly. She walked straight to the red emergency lockout terminal mounted securely on the main maintenance pillar. She reached deep into her chest pocket and pulled out a bright red warning tag. Her hand was completely steady as she wrote the time, the date, and the damning words. Magnetic chip anomaly. Mandatory borescope inspection required. She attached the heavy red tag directly to the engine cowling latch, securing it tightly. She then turned to the glowing computer terminal. She typed in her Federal Mechanic Identification number. She locked the aircraft's dispatch status. With 4 rapid, deliberate keystrokes, Maya put the airline's flagship A350 into a hard aircraft on-ground status. Flight 808 was officially grounded. Silence. The bright yellow warning beacon on the top of the terminal instantly began flashing a harsh, blinding red. Across the massive hangar, heads snapped up in shock. The loud turning of wrenches stopped abruptly. The low murmur of the 50-man crew died instantly. Every single eye in the building locked onto the tiny figure of the 23-year-old girl standing next to the massive glowing red AOG screen. The silence stretched tight, heavy with anticipation. 10 seconds passed. 20 seconds. The flashing red light washed over the high concrete walls like a silent alarm. Then, the heavy double doors of the elevated supervisor office slammed open with explosive force. Marcus Thorne marched out onto the metal catwalk. He took the metal stairs 2 at a time, moving with frightening speed. His face was flushed a dark, furious red. His polished leather boots hit the concrete floor with incredibly angry thuds. The crowd of senior mechanics parted like water to let him through, no one wanting to be caught near the blast radius of his legendary rage. He walked straight past Maya, ignoring her entirely, and marched straight up to the massive Rolls-Royce engine. He violently ripped the red tag off the cowling latch with a vicious jerk and threw it onto the oil-stained ground. "Who locked out my plane?" Marcus barked. His voice echoed violently off the high steel ceiling, demanding absolute submission. Maya stepped forward. She kept her small shoulders perfectly squared. She kept her voice perfectly steady, betraying absolutely no fear. "I did, sir," Maya said. Marcus slowly turned his head to look down at her. His eyes swept over her navy blue coveralls, her messy hair, and her greasy hands with pure disgust. "You?" Marcus sneered, his lip curling. "The rookie? You grounded the flagship 14 hours before a multi-billion-dollar merger flight? The right engine magnetic chip detector is heavily contaminated," Maya stated clearly, her voice cutting through the dead, silent hangar. "There is a massive, dangerous accumulation of metal fuzz on the primary plug. I am formally requesting a full borescope inspection of the N2 compressor blades." Marcus let out a loud, highly mocking laugh. It was a cruel, theatrical sound designed to belittle. He looked around at the wide circle of watching mechanics, openly inviting them to join in his amusement. A few of the older men shifted uncomfortably and chuckled nervously, desperate to please the powerful boss. "A borescope inspection," Marcus repeated loudly, his voice dripping with heavy condescension. "A full internal borescope inspection takes 8 long hours, little girl. It means we completely miss our international departure window. It means we cost this airline $50,000 in unrecoverable penalties. It means the executives upstairs miss their bonuses, and they come down here looking for someone to fire. If we do not inspect the internal compressor, the engine will suffer an uncontained failure in mid-flight," Maya said, absolutely refusing to back down. "The metal texture on the plug is highly anomalous. It does not behave, feel, or look like aerospace-grade titanium." Marcus stopped laughing immediately. His face hardened into a terrifying mask of pure malice. He stepped directly into Maya's personal space, looming aggressively over her smaller frame, deliberately attempting to use his physical size to crush her resolve. "Listen to me very closely," Marcus whispered, his tone venomous and sharp. "You do not know the first thing about titanium. You sweep the floors, you fetch the heavy tools. You are only here because the Human Resources Department needed a poster child for a diversity magazine cover. Do not ever pretend you understand complex aviation engineering." He aggressively snatched the heavy magnetic plug right out of Maya's gloved hand. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a dirty, red cotton shop rag. With one careless, sweeping motion, Marcus wiped the magnetic tip completely clean. The glittering metal fuzz, The absolute only piece of physical evidence proving a catastrophic internal failure was imminent, was instantly smeared deep into the greasy fabric of the rag, lost forever. Maya's dark eyes widened in genuine, profound horror. You just destroyed the evidence. You cannot do that. That is a massive federal violation. I just cleaned off normal break-in wear, Marcus said smoothly, his voice instantly returning to a calm, arrogant cadence. New engines shed metal. It is standard operational friction. Try reading a real manual sometime. It was absolutely not standard wear, Maya insisted, her voice raised slightly, echoing clearly in the quiet hangar. You did not even test the material. You did not even look at it. Marcus completely ignored her. He turned his broad back on her and walked confidently over to the lockout terminal. He pulled out his gold-trimmed personal authorization badge. He aggressively swiped it through the magnetic reader. The terminal screen instantly flashed from warning red to a bright, clear green. The AOG status was officially overridden and permanently cleared from the system. He pulled a fresh, crisp federal document from his leather clipboard. It was an FAA Form 8130-3, the Authorized Release Certificate. It was the strict, legal guarantee, backed by the full weight of the federal government, that the engine was 100% safe for commercial flight. Marcus pulled an expensive gold pen from his pristine shirt pocket. He did not look back at the engine. He did not run a secondary diagnostic test. He did not even bother to look at the maintenance logs. He simply scrawled his signature casually across the bottom of the page. A textbook, undeniable, completely illegal pencil whip. He turned back to face Maya. He reached deep into his pocket and pulled out a heavy titanium bolt, a leftover piece of solid hardware from an earlier unrelated job. You do not ground my planes, little girl. Maya Lin did not blink. The magnetic chip detector is coated in metal fuzz, Mr. Thorne. It is a mandatory ground. The heavy titanium bolt flew across the hangar. It bounced hard off Maya's collarbone. It hit the concrete floor with a sharp, ringing clang. Marcus Thorne smiled, adjusting his pristine white hard hat. You hold the flashlight. I sign the release. He turned and walked away, his polished boots clicking rhythmically against the concrete, leaving Maya standing entirely alone under the massive, dark shadow of the right wing. The other mechanics immediately turned back to their work, aggressively pretending they had not seen a single thing, absolutely terrified of drawing Marcus's wrath. Maya reached up and slowly rubbed her collarbone where the heavy bolt had struck her, leaving a blooming bruise. She looked down at the piece of metal, resting innocently on the cold floor. Then her eyes shifted to the metal trash can nearby, the trash can where Marcus had casually tossed the dirty red shop rag, the rag that still contained the microscopic metallic shavings, the rag that held the absolute, undeniable truth. Pops Henderson's voice echoed loudly, perfectly clear in her mind. The metal always tells the truth when it breaks. Marcus Thorne truly thought the argument was over. He had no idea she was about to methodically document every massive fraud he had ever committed. And he certainly had no idea that when that cheap, counterfeit turbine blade finally shattered at 35,000 feet over the freezing Pacific Ocean, the young woman he had just publicly humiliated would be the only person on Earth who could stop his plane from falling out of the sky. Silence. The real investigation was just about to begin. 6 a.m. shift change. The hangar floor buzzed with 50 mechanics. The air smelled of Jet A fuel. Marcus stood holding court. Maya stood back, hands stained with fluid. Marcus waited for the chatter to die down. He held up a bag containing the wipe from the magnetic chip detector. He locked eyes with Maya. "It seems our new apprentice got spooked last night," Marcus said, dripping condescension. "She found dust on a plug, wanted to ground the flagship aircraft for a borescope inspection, wanted to cost this airline $20,000 a minute." Laughter echoed through the men. "So," Marcus continued, smiling thinly, "to make sure our paranoid princess doesn't have more panic attacks, she is off engine duty. Maya, you are on the blue water truck for the next 30 days. Go pump the lavatory holding tanks on the regional jets. And please, try not to ground the toilets." Laughter erupted again. Maya's jaw remained level. She only cared about physics. "Aerospace-grade titanium smears between your fingers. It has a distinct shear point." But the fuzz off that magnetic plug didn't smear. It crumbled, like cheap, porous iron. Under the pressure of a jet engine, that was impossible. The blue water truck was degrading. The smell of lavatory chemicals burned her nose, and the tarmac heat baked the concrete to over 120 degrees. Mechanics drove by, averting eyes. For 8 exhausting hours, Maya dragged heavy hoses, but her mind ran complex metallurgical algorithms. A Rolls-Royce engine does not shed granular metal unless a core rotational component is degrading exponentially. When an engine spools up for takeoff, the internal temperature hits nearly 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Turbine blades spin at 10,000 revolutions per minute. At those terrifying speeds, a single blade experiences a centrifugal pull equivalent to the weight of a loaded freight train. If a blade is made of pure titanium 6 aluminum 4 vanadium, it stretches exactly 1 millimeter during flight. It holds. If made of anything else, it warps and eventually shatters. Maya knew the tail number. She remembered the batch code Marcus pencil-whipped. She needed proof, but it was locked inside the secure parts cage. Midnight. The main hangar was quiet. Maya walked into the tool crib. Pops Henderson was reading a paperback under a single desk lamp. Maya pointed a grease-stained finger toward a heavy black Pelican case on the top shelf. Pops looked at the case, then at Maya. "That is a $40,000 X-ray fluorescence analyzer," Pops said softly. "Only the chief inspector is authorized to sign that out. If Marcus catches you, he will pull your maintenance license." Silence. Maya looked him dead in the eye. "If I don't touch it, 300 people are going to drop out of the sky over the Pacific Ocean." Pops stared for 5 seconds. He closed his book and walked to the far end of the crib. Maya grabbed the heavy case. She slipped through the dark corridors to the secure parts cage. Maya pulled out stainless steel safety wire, bent it into a tension wrench, and picked the padlock in 14 seconds flat. Inside, she found the box with the matching batch number. The exact batch Marcus had installed in the right engine of Flight 808. She lifted out the XRF analyzer. It fired high-energy X-rays into metal to identify the elemental composition on an atomic level. She pressed the nose of the analyzer against the root of a spare turbine blade. She pulled the trigger. The machine hummed. 3 seconds later, the screen flashed green. Titanium content, 14%. Aluminum, trace amounts. Vanadium, 0. It was mostly cheap steel, a counterfeit disguised as a $30,000 turbine blade. And Marcus had just approved an entire engine filled with them. She went straight to the filing cabinets in the records room. She pulled the FAA Form 8130-3, the authorized release certificate, the birth certificate of an airplane part. Maya held the paper to the fluorescent light. The watermark was slightly offset. The supplier code didn't route back to the official manufacturer. It routed to an anonymous shell company in Southeast Asia. Marcus wasn't just lazy. He was running a massive black market supply ring. He was buying counterfeit, uncertified parts for pennies on the dollar, forging federal release certificates, and millions hidden in offshore accounts. And he was putting those weak, brittle parts into commercial airliners, carrying thousands of passengers every single day. Maya knew she couldn't take this to Marcus or human resources. She needed someone with absolute authority to ground the fleet immediately, someone above Marcus. 8 a.m. the next morning. Maya bypassed the hangar floor, walking straight into the corporate terminal for an urgent meeting with the vice president of maintenance. The VP's office was a sanctuary of quiet power. The vice president possessed a smile that never quite reached his cold eyes. Maya laid the evidence on his immaculate desk. The printed XRF spectrometer readouts, the forged release certificates, the exact metallurgical breakdown of the counterfeit blades. She explained what Marcus was doing. She explained the physics of the metal stress. She explained that the right engine of Flight 808 was a ticking time bomb. The vice president listened in complete silence. "Maya," he said, dripping with paternal concern, "this is incredibly serious. You have done an outstanding job bringing this to my attention. It takes immense courage to speak up against a superior. The safety of our passengers is our absolute highest priority." He gathered the papers and placed them gently into a thick leather folder. "I am going to launch a full internal audit immediately. I will handle Marcus Thorne personally. But I need you to keep this strictly confidential. We cannot afford a media panic. Do you understand?" Maya let out a shaky breath. A wave of profound relief washed over her. The system worked. "Yes, sir," she said. She stood up, turned around, and walked out of the office. Silence. The heavy oak door clicked shut. The vice president's warm expression instantly vanished. His face went dead. He didn't call the FAA. He didn't call the hangar to order Flight 808 grounded. He turned to his computer. He opened his email. He scanned Maya's digitized report, attached it to a new encrypted message, and typed exactly 4 words. "We have a problem." He clicked send. The recipient was Marcus Thorne. What Maya didn't know was that the airline was 6 weeks away from a $2 billion corporate merger. The counterfeit parts were a highly profitable business strategy the vice president had personally approved to keep maintenance costs down. Back on the hangar floor, the heat was rising. Maya walked toward the blue water truck. She thought the nightmare was over. She thought Marcus would be escorted out in handcuffs within the hour. Instead, Marcus was sitting in his glass-walled office, overlooking the floor. His computer chimed. He opened the email from the vice president. He read the 4 words. He opened the attachment. He saw the XRF readouts. He saw the timeline. He saw Maya's name at the bottom of the damning report. Marcus didn't panic. Men like Marcus never panic when they are caught. They simply decide to crush whoever caught them. He slowly closed the email. He stood up. He walked out of his office, his heavy steel-toed boots echoing on the metal stairs. The tension in the hangar immediately shifted. The ambient noise dropped. The other mechanics stopped turning wrenches. Marcus walked straight toward the locker room, his eyes locked on his target. How far will a man with a $3 million pension go to destroy a 23-year-old girl? And how many flight hours does that counterfeit blade have left before the fractures rip the right engine of Flight 808 apart? Maya was standing at her open locker, reaching for her safety glasses. She didn't hear Marcus approach until his massive hand slammed her locker door shut, missing her fingers by a fraction of an inch. The metallic crash sounded like a gunshot in the confined space. Marcus loomed over her. His face was flushed red. His voice was dangerously quiet, a venomous whisper that only she could hear. "You think you're smart, little girl," Marcus hissed. "You think you can play federal inspector with equipment you are not authorized to touch." Maya didn't flinch. She stepped back, her spine hitting the cold steel of the lockers. "You are putting fake parts in commercial jets. You are going to kill hundreds of people." Marcus laughed, a dry, hollow sound that held no humor. "I am saving this company millions of dollars," Marcus said. "I am keeping these planes in the air. You are a glorified janitor who stole a $40,000 piece of company property to run an unauthorized scan. That is corporate espionage." He reached into his pocket and pulled out heavy aviation wire cutters. Maya watched as he casually reached into her open toolkit on the bench. He grabbed her custom-calibrated torque wrench, the one she had saved up for 6 months to buy. With one swift motion, he snapped the delicate calibration head right off. He tossed the broken pieces onto the oily concrete floor. "You are fired," Marcus said. His voice was cold, absolute, and final. "Effective immediately. And because you stole company property to conduct this little espionage mission, I am logging into the FAA database right now. I am red flagging your airframe and power plant license for gross misconduct and theft. You will never turn a wrench on an airplane for the rest of your life. You are permanently blacklisted." Silence. Maya stood frozen. The air was violently knocked out of her lungs. Her federal license wasn't just a piece of paper. It was her entire life. It was her identity. It was the only thing that separated her from the crushing poverty she had grown up in. 2 airport security guards appeared at the end of the aisle. "Escort this trespasser off the property," Marcus commanded. He turned his broad back on her and walked away. The guards flanked her, marching her aggressively through the hangar past 50 mechanics who watched in silence. No one said a word. No one stepped forward. The system was protecting itself. They walked her out into the blinding midday sun, pushed her through the turnstiles, and left her on the curb outside the terminal. Maya stood alone on the concrete. The brutal heat radiating off the asphalt blurred the horizon. She had lost everything: her job, her license, her future. But as she stood there, trembling with rage and defeat, the deep, rhythmic thud of massive jet engines taxiing toward the runway shook the concrete beneath her feet. She slowly looked up, shielding her eyes from the glare. It was the massive Airbus A350. The tail number was painted in bold black letters against the pristine white fuselage. It was Flight 808. It was carrying 312 passengers. It was carrying the counterfeit turbine blade. And what terrified Maya even more, the National Director of Aviation Safety was sitting in first class on that exact plane for a routine route audit. The plane turned onto the active runway. The engines roared, spooling up to maximum thrust. They had taken her badge. They had taken her livelihood. They had stripped her of everything she had worked for. But what Marcus Thorne and the Vice President of Maintenance failed to calculate was the terrifying clarity of a person who has absolutely nothing left to lose. And in exactly 3 hours, at 35,000 feet over the open ocean, the cheap metal inside that engine was going to teach them exactly who they had fired. The fluorescent lights in the women's locker room hummed with a low, electrical buzz. Maya Lin stood before her gray metal locker. Her hands were raw. The skin on her knuckles was cracked and peeling from a 14-hour shift spent scrubbing the holding tanks of blue water lavatories. It was the most degrading job in the aviation maintenance industry. A punishment. But Maya did not care about the smell of chemical deodorant clinging to her uniform. She only cared about the truth. She carefully wiped down a 3/8-inch torque wrench with a clean microfiber cloth. It was a snap-on. The chrome gleamed under the harsh overhead light. It had belonged to her father. He was a master mechanic who taught her how to listen to metal, how to feel its stress points. It was the only thing she had left of him. She placed it perfectly into the molded foam slot of her heavy red metal toolbox. Then the heavy steel door of the locker room burst open. It swung so hard it dented the plaster wall behind it. Marcus Thorne walked in. He did not hesitate. He did not care that this was the women's changing area. The chief inspector brought the scent of expensive cologne and jet fuel into the small, humid space. His heavy gold watch caught the fluorescent light. His face was flushed red with absolute rage. In his right hand, he held a crumpled piece of paper. It was a printout of the confidential email Maya had sent to the vice president of maintenance just 2 hours ago. The email containing the XRF spectrometer data. The undeniable elemental breakdown, proving Marcus was approving counterfeit parts for the airline's flagship planes. Marcus did not say a word at first. He crossed the room in 3 heavy strides. He grabbed the handle of Maya's red toolbox. He lifted it high into the air, and he turned it completely upside down. Silence. A rain of heavy, precision-machined steel crashed onto the concrete floor. Sockets, ratchets, micrometers, and wrenches bounced and scattered into the dark corners of the room. The deafening clatter echoed off the tiled walls like shrapnel. Maya did not flinch. Her jaw locked. She watched her father's torque wrench slide across the dirty floor and stop against the toe of Marcus's steel-toed boot. "You think you are smart," Marcus spat. His voice was a low, venomous hiss. "You think you can sneak around my hangar. You think you can use company equipment to run unauthorized tests on my parts." He stepped forward, kicking the torque wrench out of his way. The turbine blades in batch 417 are not aerospace-grade titanium. They are commercial alloy. They will fail under thermal stress. Marcus laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound. "You are fired, effective immediately, for theft of company property. Specifically, the unauthorized use of the XRF analyzer." Marcus did not look up from his screen. "I already filed the police report. But that is not the worst part for you." He turned the tablet around so she could see the screen. It was the Federal Aviation Administration Central Database, the federal portal for mechanic certifications. Marcus had her profile open. He pressed a large red button on the screen. "You will never touch an airplane again," Marcus whispered, stepping so close she could feel the heat radiating off him. "You are blacklisted from every airline on the planet. You are nothing." 2 massive security guards appeared in the doorway. Marcus snapped his fingers and pointed at Maya. The guards stepped forward. Each took one of Maya's arms. They did not let her pick up her father's tools. They did not let her grab her jacket. They marched her out of the locker room. Maya kept her chin high. She did not cry. She did not struggle. She let them march her out the massive blast doors into the cold, unforgiving rain of the employee parking lot. Silence. It took Maya an hour to walk back to her cramped studio apartment. Her uniform was soaked through. The rain dripped from her hair onto the cheap linoleum floor of her kitchen. She did not turn on the main lights. She only clicked on the small desk lamp sitting on her kitchen table. Spread across the scratched wooden surface were the carbon copies of the XRF spectrometer printouts, the true data, the elemental fingerprint of the counterfeit turbine blade she had scanned. She sat down in the wooden chair. She pulled a yellow legal pad and a pencil toward her. Maya looked at the numbers. It was a basic commercial alloy, strong enough for bicycle frames or cheap car parts, but a jet engine was a different beast entirely. Maya began to calculate the thermal expansion coefficient. She wrote the equations with rapid, precise strokes of her pencil. The Rolls-Royce Trent 10th Century engine operated at extreme parameters. The core temperature of the combustion chamber reached over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Meanwhile, outside the aircraft, the air temperature at cruising altitude dropped to minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. The N2 compressor spool, the section holding the counterfeit blades, spun at a staggering 12,000 revolutions per minute. Maya calculated the centrifugal force pulling outward on the metal. Thousands of pounds of pressure trying to tear the blade from its root. Then, she calculated the thermal soak. At ground level, the cheap alloy held its shape. Even during the massive heat of takeoff, the metal would survive the brief surge in power. But once the aircraft reached 35,000 feet, once the freezing air blasted the engine casing, shrinking the outer shell, while the inner core continued to burn white-hot, Maya's pencil snapped. 35,000 feet. At exactly 35,000 feet, the blade would strike the casing. The impact at 12,000 revolutions per minute would shatter the brittle alloy into 100 jagged pieces of shrapnel. A catastrophic, uncontained engine failure. The metal fragments would slice through the hydraulic lines, tear through the wing structure, and ignite the fuel tanks. The plane would fall from the sky. Maya scrambled for her laptop. She opened the airline's internal crew scheduling portal. Her login had not been fully disabled yet. She searched for the tail number of the flagship Airbus A350. The plane Marcus had pencil-whipped that morning. Destination, Tokyo. Departure time, 8:00 p.m. Maya glanced at the digital clock on her microwave. She scrolled down to the passenger manifest. 312 passengers, 14 crew members, and sitting in seat 2A in the first-class cabin was a name that made Maya's blood run cold. The National Director of Aviation Safety for the Federal Aviation Administration. He was conducting a surprise route audit. He was the highest-ranking aviation safety official in the country. If Marcus Thorne's $14 million counterfeit parts scheme brought that plane down, it would not just be a tragedy. It would be the darkest day in the history of commercial aviation. The tires of her old sedan screeched as she threw the car into a loading zone outside Terminal 4. She left the engine running. She sprinted through the automatic sliding glass doors. "Excuse me, move. Please move." She looked up at the massive blue departure board. Flight 808 to Tokyo, Gate 42, status, final boarding. She slammed it against the scanner pad. A Transportation Security Administration agent stepped forward, holding up a hand. "Miss, you need to step back. That badge is dead." Maya looked past him. Through the glass partition, she could see the long hallway leading to Gate 42. She could see the nose of the massive white aircraft waiting outside in the dark. "Hey, stop right there!" the agent yelled, reaching for his radio. Maya ran down the concourse. Her legs pumped with pure adrenaline. She knocked over a metal stanchion. The heavy base crashed against the floor. She could see the gate desk ahead. She could see the captain in his crisp white shirt and 4 gold stripes, standing by the jet bridge door. He was handing the final paperwork to the gate agent. The captain turned, frowning. Maya was only 30 feet away from the captain. She reached out her hand. They did not ask questions. They hit her like a freight train. The impact knocked the breath out of Maya's lungs in a violent rush. She crashed onto the hard, polished stone floor. Her cheekbones slammed against the terrazzo. The taste of copper flooded her mouth. A heavy knee drove into her spine, pinning her flat. "Do not move. Hands behind your back," the officer bellowed. "Counterfeit parts," she choked out, blood on her teeth. "The N2 spool is counterfeit. It will shatter." The captain stared at her, confused, horrified. But the gate agent quickly pulled the heavy glass door shut, locking the jet bridge. Cold, heavy steel ratcheted tightly around Maya's wrists. Handcuffs. They bit into her raw skin. The officers hauled her to her feet. "You are under arrest for federal trespassing and attempting to breach a secure aviation zone." She had failed. The room was small, suffocating, and reeked of stale coffee and old sweat. A single fluorescent tube flickered on the ceiling, casting pale, sickly shadows against the cinder-block walls. The heavy metal door slammed shut, the deadbolt engaged with a loud, hollow clack. Complete, isolating silence. Maya sat alone. Her uniform was torn, her face was bruising. Directly across from her, high on the concrete wall, hung a large analog clock. The second hand swept across the white face in a slow, agonizing circle. Tick, tick, tick. 5 minutes until departure. Then she felt it. Flight 808 was airborne. Maya opened her eyes. She stared at the sweeping second hand. The math began to run through her head in an unstoppable loop. 26 minutes total. 26 minutes until the microscopic grain boundaries of the counterfeit alloy stretched past their breaking point. She watched the clock. 8:01. Maya did not look at him. She did not look at the folder. Her eyes remained locked, completely fixated on the analog clock. 8:04. "Are you listening to me?" the chief asked, leaning forward. "This is not a game. You are going to a federal penitentiary. Tell me your radio has the emergency aviation band." "The radio on your belt," Maya said, finally turning her dark eyes to meet his. Her gaze was piercing, unflinching. "Tell me it can tune to the emergency air traffic control frequency." 8:08. 18 minutes, she whispered. 18 minutes until the right engine on Flight 808 explodes. At 8:26 p.m., the N2 compressor spool in the right engine will shatter. It will cause a catastrophic, uncontained compressor stall. The pilots will try to use the standard asymmetrical thrust checklist, but the counterfeit metal will melt and fuse to the casing. The vibration will begin to tear the wing off the fuselage. And the FAA National Director of Aviation Safety is sitting in seat 2A. When that plane goes down, he goes with it, and every federal investigator in the country is going to find out that you had the warning, and you sat in this room drinking coffee. The chief stopped writing. The pen hovered over the paper. He looked at the young woman chained to his bench. He looked at the bruising on her cheek. He looked at the absolute terrifying certainty in her eyes. He swallowed hard. A burst of static filled the room. Then silence. 8:12. The chief leaned back in his chair. He crossed his arms. He did not say another word. Tick, tick, tick. 8:15. It was exactly 8:26 p.m. Mayday, mayday, mayday. He stared at Maya in absolute horror. The clock had run out. Just like she said it would, 35,000 feet above the dark expanse of the Pacific Ocean, Flight 808 cut through the night. The flagship Airbus A350 was a pressurized tube of artificial calm. Inside the cabin, 300 passengers slept. They trusted the machine. They trusted the airline. They had no idea they were riding on borrowed time. In the first-class cabin, sitting in seat 1A, was Robert Vance. He was the National Director of Aviation Safety for the FAA. He was conducting a routine route audit. His presence was supposed to be a formality. It was about to become the most important flight of his life. Down below, on the ground, the reality was very different. Inside a windowless airport police interrogation room, Maya Lin sat perfectly still. Her wrists were secured in heavy steel handcuffs. The cuffs were chained to a thick metal bench bolted to the concrete floor. Across the metal table, the airport police chief flipped through a file. Maya did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the digital clock mounted on the wall. It was 11:42 p.m. Her mind was not in the room. Her mind was 35,000 feet in the air. She was visualizing the internal architecture of a $30 million Rolls-Royce Trent engine. She was tracking the precise thermal expansion of a counterfeit commercial alloy blade. She knew the exact temperature where the molecular bonds would begin to yield. "You have to call the tower," Maya said. The police chief sighed. He closed the file. "We have been over this, Miss Lin," he said. "You trespassed on a secure tarmac. You assaulted a security officer. You are a fired mechanic having a meltdown. I am not calling the control tower." Maya leaned forward. The steel chain rattled against the bench. At exactly 11:46 p.m., the right engine on Flight 808 is going to fail, Maya said. The N2 compressor blade is not aerospace-grade titanium. It is a cheap commercial alloy. It is currently melting. When it fractures, it will cause an uncontained failure. The police chief shook his head. Silence. 11:43. High above the clouds, inside the cockpit of Flight 808, the captain monitored the glass displays. The flight was incredibly smooth. The autopilot was holding altitude perfectly. The engine parameters were entirely green. Everything looked completely normal. But inside the right engine, the laws of metallurgy were taking over. The extreme heat of the combustion chamber was too much for the cheap alloy. The counterfeit blade began to warp. It elongated. It scraped against the titanium engine casing. Microscopic metal shavings were sheared off. They flew backward through the high-pressure turbine. The magnetic chip detector was already covered in a thick layer of metallic sludge. But the sensor had been bypassed. Marcus had pencil-whipped the release log. He had silenced the early warning system. 11:44. The warping blade reached its absolute structural limit. The internal stress became catastrophic. Snap. The counterfeit blade sheared off completely. It was sucked backward into the rapidly spinning turbine section. It shattered 3 other blades instantly. The structural integrity of the entire engine collapsed in a fraction of a second. A massive compressor stall ripped through the right engine. It sounded like a heavy shotgun firing repeatedly right outside the cockpit window. Bang, bang, bang. The aerodynamic flow of the jet engine had completely broken down. The massive machine choked on its own violently expelled air. The entire aircraft shuddered violently. "Engine 2, severe damage!" the first officer shouted. He gripped the control yoke. The plane yawed heavily to the right. "Declare an emergency," the captain snapped. He reached for the thrust levers. Executing standard severe damage shutdown checklist. The captain pulled the right engine thrust lever to idle. He flipped the fuel control switch to cut off. The engine was completely shut down. It should have been windmilling safely in the slipstream. It did not stop. The violent shaking grew worse. In first class, Robert Vance gripped his armrests. The FAA director knew exactly what that shuddering meant. It was an uncontained failure, but it was acting completely wrong. A shut-down engine should not vibrate like this. It felt like the right wing was trying to tear itself off the fuselage. He unbuckled his seatbelt. Inside the cockpit, the instruments were displaying impossible numbers. "The N2 spool is locked up," the first officer yelled over the deafening noise. "The low-pressure spool is windmilling, but the high-pressure core is completely seized. The imbalance is destroying the wing spar." The melting counterfeit metal had acted like liquid glue. It had fused the rotating high-pressure core directly to the stationary engine casing. The massive fan blades at the front of the engine were still catching the 300-knot wind. They were trying to spin a completely paralyzed core. The asymmetrical torque was literally twisting the metal wing. "Maintenance Center, this is Flight 808, the captain yelled into his headset. "We have a catastrophic seizure on Engine 2. Standard shutdown is ineffective. We are losing structural integrity. We need immediate engineering support." Thousands of miles away, inside the airline maintenance hub, the emergency radio channel crackled to life. Marcus Thorne stood in the center of the control room. 50 mechanics and engineers stared at the main speaker. The panicked voice of the captain filled the room. Marcus stared at the radio. "Chief Inspector," the night shift supervisor said, "they need an answer. What is the procedure for a seized core with extreme vibration?" Marcus swallowed hard. He grabbed the microphone. He pressed the transmit button. "Flight 808, this is maintenance control." Marcus stammered. You must have hit a bird. A massive bird strike. Try cycling the fuel crossfeed." Silence. It was the most incompetent, generic advice possible. A bird strike could not fuse an engine core at 35,000 feet. Up in the cockpit, the FAA director had just forced his way through the door. He heard the radio transmission. "That is garbage," Robert Vance shouted. "Who is on the ground? Put me on the maintenance frequency." The captain flipped the switch. "Maintenance control, this is FAA Director Robert Vance," he barked. "Your bird strike theory is impossible at this altitude. The right wing is suffering extreme torsional stress. We have maybe 3 minutes before the spar snaps. Give me an engineering solution right now." Marcus froze. He held the microphone. He had no answer. He did not understand the intricate physics of the engine. He was a fraud, and now 300 people were going to die because of it. I don't know," Marcus whispered. Down in the windowless interrogation room, the police chief's desktop radio scanner suddenly crackled. The voice of the terrified captain echoed in the small room. He reported the locked N2 spool. He reported the extreme asymmetrical vibration. Maya sat up straight. Her eyes widened. It had happened exactly as she predicted. The counterfeit alloy had melted and seized the core. "Listen to me," Maya said. Her voice cut through the room. It was not a request. It was a command. The police chief stared at the radio. He looked back at Maya. He realized she had been telling the absolute truth. "They are doing it wrong," Maya said. She strained against the handcuffs. "The core is fused by the cheap alloy. The windmilling fan is trying to torque the locked core. They have to relieve the aerodynamic pressure on the fan blades, or the wing will snap." "How?" the police chief asked. He grabbed his radio. "Patch my voice into that frequency," Maya demanded. "Now." The police chief did not hesitate. He keyed his radio. He switched to the maintenance override channel. He placed the microphone directly in front of Maya. "Flight 808, this is Maya Lin," she said. Her voice was calm. It carried the absolute authority of true competence. "I am an A&P mechanic. Your N2 spool is fused to the casing because of melted counterfeit alloy. Ignore standard procedures." In the cockpit, the captain and the FAA director exchanged a shocked look. "Who is this?" the captain yelled. "You do not have time to argue," Maya replied. "The vibration is caused by the fan blades fighting the locked core. You must execute an asymmetrical thrust maneuver. I need you to push the left engine thrust lever to maximum power." "Maximum power?" the first officer screamed. "That will increase our speed. The drag on the dead engine will flip us over." "No, it will not," Maya said smoothly. "You must simultaneously apply maximum left rudder and bank the aircraft 15 degrees to the left. You are going to purposefully fly the airplane in a violent slip." Silence. It went against every instinct a pilot possessed. "The aerodynamic slip will block the direct airflow from hitting the right engine fan blades," Maya explained. The heavy chain rattled as she leaned closer to the microphone. "It will create an air shadow over the dead engine. The fan will stop windmilling. The torsional stress on the wing will instantly drop to zero." The FAA director stared at the radio. He recognized absolute genius when he heard it. The physics were flawless. "Do exactly what she says," Robert Vance ordered. "Right now." The captain gripped the controls. He banked the heavy aircraft sharply to the left. The massive plane groaned. It turned sideways into the wind. The direct airflow over the right wing was drastically altered. It flowed around it. The massive titanium fan blades slowly came to a halt. The agonizing, bone-rattling vibration instantly ceased. Silence. The cockpit was suddenly incredibly still. The horrific shaking was gone. The wing spar was safe. The aircraft was stable. "Vibration is zero," the first officer whispered. "She did it. The fan is stopped. We are stable." The captain let out a long breath. "Maintenance control. This is 808. The procedure was successful. We are turning back for an emergency landing. Maya Lin, whoever you are, thank you." In the interrogation room, Maya leaned back against the concrete wall. She closed her eyes. The police chief stared at her. He looked at the heavy steel handcuffs, locking her wrists to the bench. The heavy steel fell away. "Come with me," he said softly. Inside the main maintenance hangar, the atmosphere was completely toxic. Marcus Thorne paced back and forth. 50 mechanics stood in a wide circle. The massive hangar doors suddenly rolled open. FAA Director Robert Vance walked into the hangar. He was flanked by 6 federal marshals. Marcus immediately stepped forward. He pointed his finger toward the doors. "Director Vance," Marcus shouted. "Thank God you are here. I know exactly what happened. It was sabotage. I fired a disgruntled rookie mechanic earlier today. Her name is Maya Lin. She must have tampered with the engine before she left. She is a criminal." Silence. They parted down the middle. A small figure stepped out from the shadows of the tarmac. It was Maya. She walked slowly into the center of the brightly lit hangar, but her posture was perfectly straight. The airport police chief walked respectfully 2 steps behind her. Marcus froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Maya did not look angry. She looked right through him. "I didn't sabotage your engine, Marcus," Maya said. Her voice was quiet. It carried perfectly in the echoing hangar. "I documented your fraud." Marcus scoffed. "What fraud?" he stammered. You have no proof of anything. You are a fired mechanic. You stole company equipment. You have nothing." Maya tilted her head slightly. The FAA director pulled a thick manila folder from under his arm. He opened it. "She does not need to have anything on her, Mr. Thorne," Robert Vance said. His voice was like crushing granite. "Because 12 hours ago, Miss Lynn bypassed your entire corrupt chain of command." Marcus's eyes darted toward the vice president of maintenance, who was standing in the crowd. "She did not just warn the vice president," Vance continued. "She uploaded the raw XRF spectrometer data. She uploaded the forged 8130-3 release forms. And she uploaded the routing numbers for your offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands." Silence. Complete silence. "She uploaded all of it directly to the FAA encrypted federal whistleblower portal," Vance said. He closed the folder. "The bird strike lie is destroyed. The sabotage lie is destroyed. The only thing left destroyed is you." Marcus Thorne stopped breathing. His arrogant smirk didn't just fade. It collapsed entirely. His shoulders slumped. The color drained completely from his face, leaving a sickly gray pallor. His knees actually buckled slightly. He reached out to grab a tool cart to keep from falling. The absolute realization of his destruction crashed into him. He had thought he was silencing a powerless rookie. He had actually forced the smartest metallurgical savant in the industry to completely dismantle his entire life. He had handed her the hammer. She had just driven the final nail. The federal marshals stepped forward simultaneously. The lead marshal grabbed Marcus by the shoulder. "Marcus Thorne, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, falsification of aviation records, and 300 counts of attempted manslaughter," the marshal barked. Another pair of marshals walked directly into the crowd of mechanics. Marcus was hauled toward the exit. He looked back over his shoulder. He looked at Maya. He realized he was never going to see the outside of a prison cell again. "Keep walking," the marshal ordered, shoving him forward. By noon, Marcus Thorne's offshore bank accounts were frozen. He was stripped of every asset he had ever stolen. The airline's stock price plummeted. The lucrative corporate merger was instantly canceled. The corrupt management structure was entirely purged. The airline was forced to ground and meticulously inspect 40 different planes. It cost them hundreds of millions of dollars. But it saved thousands of lives. The FA director slid a heavy gold-embossed envelope across the desk. "Your A&P license has been fully restored, Miss Lynn," Vance said warmly, "with a federal commendation for extreme aeronautical bravery. I also have authorization to offer you a direct position as a senior federal investigator in Washington. Name your salary." Maya looked at the envelope. She smiled softly. "I appreciate the offer, Director Vance," Maya said, "but I belong in the hangar. I belong with the metal." The new CEO leaned forward. "I was hoping you would say that," the CEO said, "because this airline has a massive trust deficit to rebuild, and I cannot think of anyone better to rebuild it." He slid the second envelope forward. Maya opened it. It was a contract. She read the title. Chief of Quality Assurance. It was Marcus's old job, but with complete unchallengeable authority over the entire global fleet. "You will answer to no one except the board of directors," the CEO promised. "If you say a plane does not fly, it does not fly, period." Maya picked up the pen. She signed her name. 6 months later. It was 2 a.m. The massive maintenance hangar was quiet. The harsh fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. A brand new flagship aircraft sat in the center bay. The massive engine cowlings were open. The complex labyrinth of titanium pipes and wires was exposed. A senior mechanic, a man in his 50s who used to mock Maya's obsessive nature, stood near the engine. He held a clipboard. He looked nervous. Footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. Maya walked into the light. She was not wearing a suit. She was wearing clean, pressed coveralls. Her badge gleamed on her chest. The senior mechanic respectfully stepped back. He handed her the clipboard. He did not say a word. He simply waited. Maya did not look at the paperwork first. She never did. She pulled a heavy, tactical flashlight from her belt. She stepped up to the massive engine. She shined the beam deep into the core. She checked the safety wire on the high-pressure fuel lines. She checked the torque marks on the titanium bolts. She traced her fingers over the smooth, cold metal. Old Pops Henderson stood nearby, wiping a wrench with a rag. He watched her. A proud smile wrinkled the corners of his eyes. "Metal never lies, does it, kid?" Pop said softly. Maya turned her head. She smiled at the old man. "No, Pops," she replied. "It never does." She looked down at the clipboard. She pulled a pen from her pocket. She signed her name on the release form. She handed it back to the senior mechanic. "Clear it for flight," she ordered. Silence. The sound of the heavy hangar doors rolling open filled the night. The massive aircraft was pushed back onto the tarmac. The engines began to spool up. It was not a violent shudder. It was a smooth, perfect, rising whine of absolute mechanical precision. In this world, the loudest voice in the room often thinks they hold all the power. They think arrogance can bend reality. They think a signature on a piece of paper can hide a fatal flaw. But true power does not need to shout. True power is quiet. It is observant. It is the unwavering commitment to the truth, hidden deep inside the machine. Marcus Thorne thought he could command the sky with a counterfeit lie, but he forgot one simple, undeniable rule. When the heat rises and the pressure becomes absolute, the cheap imitations will always shatter. And the only thing left standing will be the forged titanium of a person who actually knows what they are doing.